So my name is John Wilson. I'm part of the Global Centre of Excellence, focusing on the digital supply chain portfolio at SAP. Digital supply chain covers a whole range of different areas, from project management to manufacturing to asset management, supply chain planning and logistics. But today, really want to talk a bit about advancing what we're doing in intelligent asset by creating what we call a digital thread that goes all the way from the initial design of an asset all the way through its life cycle through to when we might decommission it. So, I guess to start with, what do we mean by a digital thread? In some of the sessions that we've had over the last day and a half, we've had some examples of digital twins, and quite often we see that digital twin, that digital representation of an asset being used in a particular domain. So you might use it during operations and maintenance, you might use it during design. But really what we see is the value of actually having that digital representation, that digital twin, being created and used throughout the complete life cycle. So all the way from the initial design stage through the construction or manufacture of that asset, through into operations and maintenance, and then of course the ongoing service provisions, upgrades, refurbishments, and ultimately decommissioning. And so for us, we see that digital thread as a way to bring that digital information together across that life cycle to support all of the business processes that go right from design through to decommissioning. So, what are the advantages of having this kind of digital thread or this digital information throughout the life cycle? Some of the advantages that we see, for example, being able to bring new assets into operation faster. So we can reduce the amount of time that it takes to design, to develop, to construct, and to hand over into operations if we're able to reuse that digital information. We can capture information and feedback, and that feedback could be coming from the people who are using those assets, the people who are responsible for maintaining them, the owners. Anyone who's involved along that life cycle should be able to feed back to earlier stages. So how do we improve our designs? Well, we take feedback along the process from people who are reviewing them or who are using those assets in operations, so that actually when we produce the next version, the next model of a particular design, we can incorporate that feedback and improve. This digital thread also enables us to use data that comes from our assets. So, many of the assets that we build today are, what we might call smart. They have sensors embedded within them, and they're actually able to report on their current condition, their health, for example. And we can use that information in a number of different ways. We can obviously use it from a maintenance perspective to understand current condition and predict future condition, but we can also use that data to understand the performance of a particular design under a specific set of operating conditions. And again, this can then feed back into the design process to help us improve the assets that we're creating. It also enables us to look at innovation. So what are new ideas, new ways that we can adapt the assets that we use to the operational requirements that we have? So we may be able to use this, this digital thread to generate ideas, to evaluate some of those ideas, and actually to test out some of those things in a simulation sense before we maybe try and do them in the field. We get overall, improved visibility. So, that early visibility from an operational perspective of a new asset that's being designed and constructed, and visibility through operations of the current condition, the current, examples of how those assets are being used, whether they are ready for deployment, whether there is particular maintenance required to bring them to that level of readiness. We can also think more broadly outside our particular needs around how we might design and use our assets in an ethically or environmentally conscious way. So we can think about the materials that we're using, the supply chains that we're following, and all of those inputs that go into actually making an operationally ready asset. But we can think about the impact of those decisions on the broader environment as well, and start thinking about, socially responsible and ethically and environmentally responsible ways of managing those assets. And of course, across the board, having this digital thread, the goal really here is to accelerate all of the processes that are associated so that we can actually get more value out of our assets sooner. So, I want to go through, I guess, a little bit of the life cycle and talk around, some of the different areas where, this information can be captured. And really, the digital thread starts at the design stage. So, we're seeing, increasingly organizations that we work with, they're orchestrating, the engineering and development of increasingly more complex assets. There's more different parts to them. You have, as I mentioned before, sensors, so there's electronics, there's software that manages that. So you've got the physical asset, you've got the software, and you've got all of these things needing to come together. And of course, you still have business decisions to take around, what appropriate amount to spend on those assets, what appropriate amount of customization might be. So managing those trade-offs between, hey, what can I afford versus what do I need? And throughout this, we need to understand the requirements. So operational requirements. What does that actually then look like once I put that into a design? And what's interesting in this space, of course, is that SAP, we don't do the design tooling here. This is not an area that we play in. And so we work with a whole variety of partners who support those authoring tools, but we want to be able to bring the data that they create. And so this might be your documentation, it might be your CAD designs. We need to bring that information into our enterprise business processes. So the sorts of things that we're looking for when, in that authoring tool collaboration space is we need to be able to support a range of different tools. So, there may be multiple sources of input. Different organizations have their preferences for tools. So we can't lock into a single one. We definitely need to support multidisciplinary product development. So as I mentioned before, there's virtually no product now that doesn't have some element of electronics or software built into it, but it's an inherent part of the definition of that product or that asset. And we want to be able to capture the information, in those design tools and synchronize that across into our enterprise business processes. So, when we're doing the design, we want to be understanding the materials that are involved so that we can then subsequently transfer that across into a procurement example or into a manufacturing bill of materials or into a project that is then going to go and construct that asset. And this information really lays that foundation for this digital thread. So we capture all of that design information up front, because a lot of that design information can actually be reused. So we have examples where we will do models and simulation to understand how a particular asset might perform under operational conditions. So we're testing the design. Those models are actually incredibly useful when we get into operations and maintenance. We'll talk about that a little bit later. One big announcement that SAP did make earlier this year, so back in July, we announced a major partnership with Siemens. So I mentioned that SAP doesn't really work in those design tool space. Siemens really are a leader in that space. And so actually SAP and Siemens, two fairly significant German companies, have come together to establish a much closer relationship around the design information that is often captured inside Siemens tools like Teamcenter, and how that information then can be shared and integrated through into an enterprise business process that might be running in a tool like SAP. So, and I think, this is one example, I guess, of the collaboration that is starting to happen in the industry. And I think, we're going to see more and more of this, that these kind of relationships where we're actually joining sort of upstream design with downstream business processes, because it really helps us improve how quickly we can design products, get them into production and manufacturing. It helps us with that sustainability, and as I mentioned before, helps us create that foundation of that digital thread. So of course, once you have your design, you then need to go into your planning, and what we see in the planning space is that planning is moving from being organizational, and even within many organizations it can often be siloed, and we're seeing approaches like integrated business planning to bring together the silos within an organization so that you at least have a common plan at the enterprise level. But actually planning needs to go beyond that. So when we're talking about complex assets, typically there are many different parties that are involved who are working on the development, the design, and ultimately the construction of these assets. And in order for those parties to work together, they have to collaborate. So they need the visibility, they need a consistent set of information that they're using, and we obviously want to eliminate the manual effort that's required to take information that already exists in one system. So I might have it in my project schedule, but then I have to rekey or re-enter and bring that into another format, because as a engineering construction operations company, I might be using a different system. So we want that collaboration to be across enterprise systems, across organizational boundaries. And we see when that happens that we're actually able to improve our ability to deliver projects and deliver these complex assets into operations. And this is an area that, it's an area that we've struggled with for decades. We see a lot of these large-scale construction projects are not delivered on budget. They're not delivered on time. So the majority actually are not. And what's worse, the complexity of these projects is increasing as the assets that we're constructing, get bigger, get more technologically advanced. Actually, the projects that are supporting them are getting harder to deliver. And so, we really, this collaborative project management is really key to being able to manage and tame some of that complexity. And the digital supply chain, that coordination, all of the things that go into successfully delivering a project really is becoming the battleground for how we're going to be successful and improve, productivity in this space. So, when we see, tens or hundreds of suppliers, coming together to deliver a particular project, we need to have open solutions. We need to have open standards, and we need to have collaborative practices in order to be able to deliver that. So, the note there, construction projects, they are a joint effort. No one does this by themselves. So we need those tools to support that. And so, the trends that we're seeing in this space, so I mentioned, the assets are getting smarter, more capability is being built in there. But, that need for that digital data and the sharing of that digital data as part of that digital thread supporting the entire life cycle is now key. And we're seeing the users, being increasingly connected. We just saw the presentation from the team at Apple there, so actually having the devices with you wherever you are, so being able to access that information, in the field, when I'm on site, when I'm in the office, always connected. So being able to access that information. And we see, technology is not the answer to everything here, but it is a critical factor in being able to influence the efficiency and effectiveness here. And this construction area, manufacturing area is a space that, from a technology point of view, has been a bit of a laggard compared to a number of other industries. And we're seeing a lot of practices today that have existed for decades and there really is a need for modernisation in this space. So, you know, the concept of collaborative project networks is important here. It's about bringing together, you know, different areas. So, you know, I need my digital twin and my digital model of the asset that I'm building, and ideally I inherit that from the design stage, and then I start actually adding the as constructed information to it. Of course, you know, document management, you know, we won't get away from unstructured documents here. They're still going to be a key part. So I need to be, but I want to be able to relate those documents to the, you know, the assets that are being delivered. And of course, collaboration, being able to share information, being able to run business processes that start in one organization, flow through to others, and then come back. And around that, of course, you know, I have the information space that we're talking about, managing my schedules, my tasks, managing project issues, compliance, sign-off and verification. All of these things are very important when we talk about projects. And, you know, there's a number of different areas that, you know, that benefit when we adopt this approach. So then, you know, when we move beyond the construction phase, you know, into the actual delivery and handover into operations, here in this space, then, you know, we need to be able to take, you know, the design and the planning information and actually now capture all of the construction information in terms of, you know, for that handover. So now actually I'm getting to the point where, you know, I may actually be creating asset master records and, you know, all the asset structure that goes with it. I'm setting up, you know, my operations and maintenance. And in the majority of cases, you know, that requires a tremendous amount of manual data manipulation, re-entry into new systems. What we need to be able to do is move from a collaborative project environment into a collaborative asset management environment. And if we can do that, then we reduce a lot of those errors and that inconsistency. But of course, you know, that means that we need to have a view of how we're going to do that up front. It needs to be part of the business relationships we have, and, you know, in many cases, you know, this needs to be part of the contract that, you know, that we have with the constructor, that actually you're going to deliver me digital information. But that doesn't just mean a whole lot of PDF documents, but actually it's structured digital information in a particular standard or a particular format that can then be reused. And so, you know, we see here, you know, similar to the idea of a collaborative project network, the role of a collaborative asset network. And really this is a, you know, a business network to support, you know, that concept of a central asset between a manufacturer or constructor, a supplier, the operator, service provider, and the other parties that are involved in that process. And, you know, that idea of that collaborative network is really to support that electronic data handover. So, you know, a lot of the information that manufacturers and constructors are building up as they're actually constructing these assets then can be shared and form the basis of the asset management layer that you're then going to take on. And so, you know, really, you know, this is about facilitating, you know, that handover. But actually, interestingly, it's enabling whole new business models where we're seeing, you know, the manufacturers of assets and constructors of assets actually going, well, there's actually a lot more value that I can add to this process rather than just handing over the asset data itself. But actually, I could hand over, for example, maintenance strategies. You know, how should this asset be maintained? What inspections should be, you know, carried out? You could go a step further and have predictive algorithms, you know, that are actually analysing the data that comes from these assets. And so, actually, as a manufacturer, you know, you potentially have a business model here where you can, you know, share and sell to a certain extent that additional content. That adds more and more value on top of the actual physical asset itself. So, you know, the goal here is, you know, with all of the different parties that are involved in this, is to move away from siloed asset information where we don't have a common language, a common taxonomy to talk about assets. We don't have collaboration, or if we do, it's largely manual, largely offline, and move that into a world where actually it's collaborative. So we have a concept of a central asset, a central system that everyone is sharing. And of course, there needs to be control and security around this, around, so you control the information that you create and who it is shared with. But that, there is benefit here for all the different parties. If you're a manufacturer, you get a benefit and you get visibility and insight into the operations of an asset and maybe feedback around how to improve it. If you are the operator, you obviously get a tremendous amount of data and information about how best to maintain and manage that asset in the future. So the last area then, of course, around maintenance, so as we move into the operations and maintenance, if we follow that digital thread, we now have all of the information available to us that lets us then set up the most appropriate maintenance strategies. And these can go beyond, the traditional sort of, run to failure or calendar-based type approaches, but can start actually then looking at condition-based maintenance or applying predictive algorithms to understand, potential asset health. Or using, I mentioned the design models that we might have had, when we did the initial design and we simulated performance under certain conditions. Well, actually, I can use those models in the operation space. So rather than using theoretical conditions, I can now actually use the real operating conditions and understand using that simulation model what the performance is going to be like. And of course, with each of those different strategies, I might apply a range of different methodologies as well. So I might look at the risk and criticality of my assets. I might look at failure modes and effects analysis, or even go down to a reliability-centered or risk-based inspection type approach. And the goal here being, ultimately to evolve from reactive and preventative to a much more proactive approach to asset management. I can see Jenny coming back online. She'll be due to wrap me up in a minute. Different approaches, and I've spoken about those, but ultimately supported also by a range of enterprise capabilities. So things like document management, portfolio and project management, 3D visualization, supporting that digital thread from end to end. So, with that, I'll wrap up and say, hey, thank you very much to Jenny and the full team at NZDIA. Hopefully you found that interesting. If you'd like any more information, please feel free to reach out and contact me. I'll be over at the SAP booth as well if you want to come and have a chat. Jenny, how are we going?
Awesome. Thank you, John. And we had another presentation in the science technology stream before you from Michael McLean. So I think it'll be really interesting looking at how we marry the learnings from both of you, because you come from such different backgrounds and perspectives. So, as I listen to the what's hot and what's important, and certainly both here and in Australia, within defence, this issue of asset management applies across the board in both technology, engineering, hard platforms, everything. So I think we'll be seeing more of this. And so thank you for helping add another piece to our jigsaw puzzle. So
hopefully not just adding pieces, but also maybe a little bit of framework on how we might put some of those pieces together.
Absolutely. Very well put. So thank you.